just curious.
Either way. Okay, so we are back. And, I did want to just add here that Tina had to step out, so took the break as an opportunity to do so. She will not be joining us for the second half of this marathon. But we can definitely proceed.
And do we know if Peter is coming back, or? I'll just leave that with staff.
Okay.
I have one question for you. Alex, do you want some water?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I have another question.
Okay.
Number 15, anticipating this as a counselor coming to council. And I'm anticipating another counselor looking at me and saying, why does it say create 2 accessible trails and advocate to council for budget support for better trail maintenance? Why does it say 2? What should I say? Is this something staff can?
You want a minimum of 2? You wanted more than 1, I think, was the origin.
Okay.
I think that could be addressed through the minimum, but I'll leave it to staff to respond.
Yeah, one thing I thought of, didn't we discuss that 2 of the trails have already they're already to some degree accessible, and that we were talking about improving them? I thought that's what it came out of, that there were kind of 2 that people had pointed to that were decently accessible and could just be kind of brought up to a fully accessible standard that they wouldn't be near the level of investment of some of the other ones.
Okay, thank you. That was probably me then. But one of them is is a municipal park. That's Headwaters Park, has a loop that some people use. It's not completely level, but the one that most people use is the trail to the lake in Crippen Regional Park from Miller Road towards the lake. There's a long, level, wide stretch. And so can the word create be improved or something? Because it looks like we're asking for the funds for 2 entirely new trails. And so that's why I'm asking for this clarity. And I looked at the committee. Any suggestions? Back to you, Chair.
Kathy has her hand.
Kathy?
If we know which 2, maybe we should name them. Takes the mystery out of it.
Yeah, because
Maybe could we, instead of saying create 2 trails, improve and then list the 2 trail names?
sure.
The accessibility of.
Okay, then this one, and just for Steph, who's just come back into the room, this is for 15. We're adjusting the wording about the 2 accessible trails. What it could say, and maybe this is what is meant, is improve the accessibility of Headwaters Trail in Headwaters Loop Trail in Headwaters Park, whatever you want to call it, and advocate for. Well, actually, it's pretty accessible already. Is the
promenade?
The one from Miller Road to towards the lake is flat and straight, and you can't do anything about the changes in pitch once you reach a certain part. It's really good already. I mean, maybe this is more about communicate about the 2 accessible trails. Anyway, I'll stop. I just would like to know. I think it's because everybody's going to look. Other councillors will look to me at the council meeting.
I mean, I think the other piece there is about now we're defining it really either of the 2 trails. Physical accessibility to the actual trail and its elevation is only part of it. Wayfinding, other parts could be improved accessibility for both. So I do think that I'd be cautious in saying the Miller Road to Colonial Lake one is nothing more can really be done to it to make it more accessible, then which one to.
Great, it sounds like I will have somebody able to speak to this on council.
I was gonna say, I'm more than happy to speak to this on the 28th.
Kathy has her hand up.
Kathy.
It's kind of funny because I go on those trails and it has never occurred to me that they are accessible. But on one of my little holidays I went to a park in Seashell. And as soon as you get out of the parking lot, it says, we have 2 accessible trails, and it's the red one and the blue one. And it gives the whole story of how they were created. And so maybe we should actually celebrate these things and label them. And that actually, there's
Improve and communicate.
what exactly 15 means, I don't think is it needs a bit of meat on those bones, but it's, if my life depended on telling you which trails are accessible, I'd feel like I don't know. But if you put a sign there, I believe you.
If I can, I have been part of making accessible trails in parks, and they're usually special standards and very flat, and so I also don't know that these would qualify as technically accessible. So I don't know what the wording is. And then I thought maybe one of them was the boardwalk in Crippen Park, because that's flat and a little bumpy if you're on wheels, but it's also I just didn't know what it said, so I'm open to suggestions. I see Steph has a good.
So you're saying it is accessible, how about accessibility elements? So communicate the location and accessibility elements of the 2 accessible-ish trails on Bowen Island, brackets, Headwaters Park and Corny Lake, including signage, and improve their accessibility, including advocating to council for budget support.
I feel like that captures it.
And Kathy's gonna hand up.
Actually, I think it's related. So I was actually on what on paper is number 14.
Indicate wheelchair and accessibility ratings.
Yeah. So I feel uncomfortable with this emphasis on wheelchair. If we were talking about indicate accessibility ratings, then I would be happier, because there's a lot of hard of hearing people who say they don't go for walks anymore because they are scared they're going to be run over by somebody on a bike. So I think for the hard of hearing people, what we need is some signage that encourages people to ring their bell or to call out. There's some places that say, ring your bell or shout, which may or may not work, or there needs to be a recognition that there is lighting and sound are part of accessibility on the trails, in addition to obviously mobility.
I agree, I think dropping the word wheelchair would fix that.
Okay. Indicate accessibility. Sorry, Robin's gonna hand up.
Robin and the neck.
I agree, we had that exact experience on the pathway coming up the hill just a short time ago. We almost got hit by bikes because they rang their bell. Angus didn't hear, and I jumped out of the way, and they were going, well, we have, it's a shared path. So I think there are ways of, it making, and if you take out the wheelchair and just like Kathy's suggesting, I think
So
you want to include everybody.
I don't know how you change that behavior, but there's more to do than just mobility.
It seems the same with ratings as well, as if you let people essentially comment on the ratings and their accuracy over time, we'll be able to identify trouble spots using that. There's areas that are considerably scoring low on public feedback ratings, on this problem. I think that'll uncover what problems we need to know.
Right.
Nick?
I think there's room for improvement, so I think a little change in wording that you've already done, Steph. is great. It sounds to me like there's future room for improvement, so we might put this in the parking lot for continued attention as we, our plan lives and grows. In the interests of moving us along. Because it sounds like we could dig quite a bit deeper into this.
Save it for the implementation strategy.
Well,
So going a little vaguer may get us off the hook for now.
I don't want to not do justice to things, but I think if we want to do a thorough job, it might deserve more attention a bit down the road. Is that respectful and okay with everybody?
So 14 can just be accessibility ratings, and 15 can just be improve accessible trails.
Yeah.
I actually reversed that. But,
Yeah, that's.
because one was like communicate the location, accessibility elements of the trails, the next one is indicate their ratings.
I'm okay with that, but I think that the point about ringing bells, et cetera, that's something we should revisit at a later time.
I agree, I think it's definitely part of the implementation though, and I think the way we've left it is open-ended enough that we can do that.
Excellent.
That I would also suggest that it hasn't been in the many hours of workshops we've done, we haven't talked about that. So that's net new information that is not part of this particular meeting. So for sure should go on the next iteration of the plan, not implementation. Yeah, the next.
I think the truth of it is that by removing the word wheelchair there, it
Yeah.
makes it open-ended enough that we can start applying ratings to things.
Yeah.
Regardless of
Yeah.
whether it's bell ringing, that's the issue, wheelchair access,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
It's a small change, but I think it captures a lot more information. Is there any others? We're at 15, or what was, working,
Simone has her hand up, she can't be.
I think Kathy.
I'm looking at 32, which is under service delivery and governance. I'm on my page 10. This off today, might not be others. It says uphold existing accessibility related covenants. I thought it might be better to, or what do you think about including the words zoning and covenants?
I would agree.
An example of at-risk zoning and covenant is that on Pullman Island Lodge by the sea. So just including the words zoning and, I think could be useful.
Especially with the OCP plan in progress update and the land use bylaw amendments that come out of that, I think that's very wise.
And for future councils, so we can leave some specific items, okay. I'm seeing general nod.
Does anyone, is there any objections? Objection carries.
It's in.
My general consent.
Kathy?
On the paper, number 17 mentions seniors keeping young. And although that sort of warms my heart, I think we should go more general with that one too.
Yeah.
So accessible public spaces for,
Seniors groups.
no, I don't even think it needs to be seniors, it just needs to be community groups. And you could put in brackets, for example, seniors keeping young, but there could be all kinds of other community groups that want to have an accessible space. It could be the garden club, it could be I would say every community group on Bowen should have an accessible space.
100%.
So I don't think it's just seniors.
Doesn't have to be
Just
specific.
so you know example, just community groups.
Joe?
It could be, e.g., if you want an example, it could be seniors keeping young, could be garden club, could be, whatever other example.
Having something like seniors keeping young as an example makes a lot of sense, just again to show the diversity of groups that benefit from accessibility. So, before I go to Sue Ellen, do we have any objections on this one?
I do.
Okay.
I think the example should be of an accessible public space, like what is meant, aren't most municipally controlled public spaces accessible? When I read this originally, I thought, oh, accessible public spaces provide access aren't what is meant. Aren't they all bookable? And, or did it mean like the cottages that are gonna be, there's supposed to be Metro Vancouver Regional Park may provide some bookable cottage space down there in the cove. I didn't know what was meant, so it's more of a question for staff or.
I would like to ask, I'll defer to the deputy corporate officer.
My recollection of this is that this is an old one that was somewhere in the old building. And then, so then it became like, oh, we have these bookable spaces, we're working on their accessibility, that's great. True confessions, we like to leave things like this in the plan so we can check them off the list if they're, yeah.
Oh, right.
But we can delete it if it's moot.
My recollection of this also was that, for example, the Boulevard Cottage, where Seniors Keeping Young is currently operating out of, is not as accessible as they would like to meet their needs, the needs of their participants. I think it was more also there's a good start with the community center, for example, being accessible, that there is needs for more accessible public space than what is currently available. So that was my
That would be like
interpretation.
create.
Gotta be like
Good.
create.
Opposed to
Or
open up.
just adding the word more in front of accessible, provide access to more accessible
I think that
public
would-
spaces.
Well,
Anyway, I just thought that might help clarify.
the community center would definitely be an example of one that has been created since. Kathy?
It's a loaded one, because the other thing, that I would like to see more of is that the default is it's accessible. That there is no such thing as a meeting which isn't accessible, that any public community organization ever embarks on. So I find it, just to give you a concrete example, the Alzheimer's Society had a meeting in the library annex. I know they have a loudspeaker. They did not provide the loudspeaker for a room full of older adults who I know could not hear what was being said in the education session. And, why is the library booking a space without saying our spaces are accessible? And the same thing, for our theater here, I asked Lee how the FM system was going. He said, well, nobody's asked for it. I said, well, do they know it exists? He said, oh yeah, there's supposed to be a sign. I said, I don't see a sign. So we just need to make these places by default accessible. And then anybody who's using a public space, the space will be accessible.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm on the library board, and so I can say that speaker is not, I think it's part of the booking. You can book it or not. Anyway, I know we've used it, or staff have used it with some groups, and there's a speaker and there's a owl thing that turns and you can use it for meetings. I think it depends on how the booking is done, which equipment the group books. But I hear you. How did that happen? I don't know. I wish Tina was here to say that, but let's assume that all groups are trying.
I think it just comes as part of the deal.
I have a wording suggestion.
Sure.
Chair, so instead of provide, maybe we can say ensure that public spaces booked by community groups are accessible. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Actually, Angus pointed that same wording out.
Well, you say it. Sorry for jumping in. It's good.
He was talking about, or pointing out how words are used in each of these sentences, and thought that provide would work.
Ensure that public spaces for community groups, e.g. Sky, are accessible.
I could just come over and kiss you, Steph.
Oh,
So great. And I just think it's also sets a good example and provides a lot of public education. People just don't have to ask for it. as if it's a dirty secret that I need the microphone. It's just there all the
So
time.
it should be the default.
It should be the default.
It shouldn't
Yeah.
be
It should be in
separate.
Absolutely.
I guess, but maybe not.
And I would offer a suggestion that at the end of where it says, accessible, after the word accessible, you might want to add, and then more such spaces are created in the future, because there is still going to be a shortage of them. A lot of the other venues, bless their hearts, on Bowen do not have the greatest accessibility. So
Do you
there's
mind
a
if I do
limited.
that second sentence? So there's a first sentence.
Oh, sure, we
And
like that
there's-
too.
They're mostly two, there's sort of a rhythm where it's
Sure.
like a bolder statement, and there's a defining statement, so, or it's more of a narrowing down. So ensure the public spaces are accessible, open up and create more.
That would be great.
Following, okay.
Bit more in future.
Moving forward.
I just think that's important, especially since we identified in the workshops that it is something that is needed, is not necessarily one that can be met by the business community at the moment. And
Which one are you on? Sorry, I can't hear.
sorry, the end of the same one.
Oh,
17.
okay.
So I'll highlight on the screen,
Just
Counselor,
I think it was
it's there as well.
Can I get the deputy corporate officer to read the equal statement?
Ensure that public spaces for community groups, for example, seniors keeping young, are accessible. Open up accessible local rooms and spaces in municipal owned buildings and communicate such, and create more accessible spaces moving forward.
I think my
No?
I thought, I heard you talking about businesses and that's what confused me there.
Oh. Sorry, I was just saying that a lot of business bookable space, like bookable spaces for private businesses don't necessarily, we identified through the workshop, don't necessarily have the greatest accessibility. I don't want to call out any specific one.
Okay, thank you.
So it's something that the municipality does need to ensure there's more of.
Thank you.
Again, I don't want to call it any single business there. Everybody's doing the best they can. But especially in retrofitting, it can be a challenge.
Open up
I see we're 5 to 6. How long is this meeting running till?
half an hour ago.
Oh, okay. I did not put my hand up like everybody.
Going after nits now, we're just going after red flags.
And we were gonna just share Kathy's document, or do you feel like that has been covered off?
I think the things that needed discussion have been covered. The rest of it's just little tweaking, you can use it or not.
At least take this last one, we just kind of accessible public spaces and pass that unanimous consent. If there's any objections to the new wording, please speak. If not, we'll carry that unanimously. Is there any other large items? So,
I'm prepared to make the motion at 4.1, which is that the Accessibility Advisory Committee recommend that council adopt, but it might be better coming from somebody who isn't a councillor. So I'm looking at page 2 of the agenda here. That's
We have a header.
4.1.
just because we end up. Okay, so before we get to it, I did have one. Okay, Nick?
No, I was prepared to second the motion.
Okay. Oh, perfect. I will handle that in a moment. I had one that I wanted to raise, but I wanted to make sure I got everything else first.
Good manners, good sharing.
Sorry.
I'm just sitting here smiling.
It,
I haven't moved it yet.
okay, it is, just regarding the creation of an accessibility bylaw. I know we had discussed that early on in the workshops, and I didn't see it reflected in the document as an item, and I assume, and I just wanted to check with staff if that was more an implementation, a possibility for manner of implementing the plan, and it's taken out of the actual action items. Is that correct?
That was a multiple staff discussion and agreement that it's a bold move for a first draft, and that this might go better for council if we start here and grow to their
Okay,
iteration.
I'm comfortable with that.
I like your bold move, Alex. Nice.
I think it was, sorry. I think we were talking too about this being an opportunity to advocate for accessibility, or we actually implement something that might have repercussions like a bylaw.
Okay.
So this is an opportunity for us to bring awareness to the community around what our expectations are and how we can actually better accommodate people and really, you know, bring accessibility to a forefront of thought and planning, just like we've been talking about here today. So this is our opportunity to really advocate for that work. And then going forward, as Steph said, as a next iteration, we would have sort of repercussions along with that, with the bylaw.
Rob?
I was gonna ask, related to that, what was your thought and reason for suggesting bylaw?
The original reason I suggested bylaw would make sense was to capture and enshrine things in more than just policy. That going forward, that a lot of pieces could be put in to a bylaw that can ensure accessibility goes forward in such a way that it has that kind of weight where it to be changed, we need to go through a bigger process. And
Yeah, and that's good to know, because I think if we are going to decide on that, even at some other point, it's good to know your reasoning behind it. So I agree.
I mean, I believe we'd be the first municipality in the province to pass such a bylaw,
Yeah.
but it, at least to my knowledge, but it would, as like the step said, be a bold move for sure, but I think it's an important one. Make sure that it's something that stays on the books as it were, across council iterations and across as the community evolves and shapes.
I think it's an important advocacy measure, in my view.
Kathy?
I don't have any kind of feelings about if it has to be in this draft, but I am thinking, you know, there is provincial legislation that would apply here. And I would need to kind of think about how do we actually use the provincial legislation to encourage, to be more forceful about what people should do. So some of the conversations I've had, maybe I'm out of line, but it's like, you know, people with disabilities have a right to accommodation. And if you're offering a public program, you know, it's your responsibility to make it accessible. And then I get pushback. And I'm not a lawyer and I don't know, you know, exactly what the chapter and verse is, but I'm pretty sure there are already laws that exist that we could be more you know, present in a stronger way. Maybe that's a good first step as opposed to creating our own bylaws.
I think bylaws would capture in my view at least, would capture elements that exist in other government bylaws and like help to strengthen that position for the things that are unique to this community. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, for example, guided service dog access, I don't really think we need to reinvent that wheel. And same with other disability accommodation legislation. So
I think that this is a whole different topic. And I think I'm not speaking against it, but I will speak against it at this point. We're already half an hour past our meeting tonight, and we still haven't adopted a draft accessibility action plan recommendation that we send this to council. And there's still like 30 more minutes worth of topic on our agenda
I
tonight.
don't think we need to do this, the update.
And I think we need, I'm afraid that putting something like a bylaw recommendation in will become the focus when it comes to council. And it may jeopardize our first draft finding a warm reception at council. Because the energy can focus on that. And I think it's better for the section 8, the implementation strategy on page 12. Anyway, I agree, I haven't put any thought to this, so I can't vote in favor of, I don't know what it would be. And I'm interested, and but I can't see how I can, so I'm not in support of adding it at this point.
I understand, and I was more just curious as to whether I actually missed it in the text of the document, or whether it was actually just not present.
Oh,
So
okay,
more
okay, so you do.
wanting to know if it wasn't present,
Okay,
what kind of the thought process was, but I'm comfortable with it not being part of this draft.
Just as a aid to memory, to reiterate what Christina said about this is an advocacy phase. I recall in the workshop, we used the example of the business license program. When it first started, we spent a year doing education. The second year was encouragement, and the third year was enforcement with fines. So that I recall in that workshop, the discussion was similar. This is an education advocacy phase, and then strengthening it would develop from there. Do you remember?
I do.
Yes, okay.
That makes a lot of sense. And it kind of was left partly on the table at the time, so I just wanted to see where we were at with that. So just check in. Robin?
Yeah, I was wasn't my intention to delay anything here. I just wanted to clarify where you were coming from.
No, it's a good question.
And personally, I would like to see that move forward as soon as possible. But at the same time, it sounds like staff and our council member are suggesting that could kind of jeopardize or delay the process of getting this through. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree that it would belong in, for example, next year's update, but not in this draft. I just, again, wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and B, kind of just understand the rationale as to where we're at. So, I agree with all of you. Like, I think it's something that's definitely for a future update. I also do think it's important that it get done at some point. And I think we just can work with that over a time period, and that's totally fine. So I'd like to ask Councilor Fast to read the recommendation, and I believe we've got we were second and ready to go and move this here.
sure, I'll just read it out. Or we can get staff to do that. That's something staff do.
That the Accessibility Advisory Committee recommend that council adopt the draft accessibility action plan as presented and amended at its July 2nd, 2025 meeting.
All right, Jessica.
I'll move.
This moves.
I'll second.
Nick seconds. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Hi.
All opposed, please say nay. Carried unanimously. Now I'd like to ask that 4.2 be deferred to our next meeting,
5.1 and 5.2.
or sorry.
Yeah, it was
Remember here?
the 5.
That's the one book.
Okay, 5.1 being
Implementation strategy.
strategy and 5.2.
Feedback is rather.
So can we move, I so move that we defer items 5.1 and 5.2 to the next AAC meeting.
Second.
Sue Ellen seconds. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Hearing none objections, carried unanimously. And I'd just like to speak briefly on UBCM. Thank you everybody who's provide feedback on council submission to UBCM. Working with staff on a incredibly tight timeline. We did submit a request to Sheila Malcolmson, Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction, to seek a meeting at UBCM, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, meeting in September. So that was submitted earlier today. And amongst other things, requests that the province look at legislation and amounts surrounding disability supports and adjust those to be more accessible and equitable, and to reflect the current economic realities, especially in high cost communities like Bowen Island. It also calls on the ministry to provide additional supports for our youth at risk, for the social inclusion lens. And there's a lot of great points brought up by this committee, and I just want to let you guys know that it definitely came through loud and clear in this submission. And I'd be more than happy to send the document as written to the minister, to the committee. Not in this line. Thank you, everybody. And last but not least, we have no public, online or in person. I believe we move straight to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
One thing I just want to say.
Yeah.
Thank you to staff who got this thing to this point.
Thank you, Councillor Fast. It definitely has been a lot of work over many years at this point to get to this point, and honestly, without dedicated staff, we could have never done it without you guys.
And without dedicated volunteers,
Yeah.
there would be nothing. So thank you.
Okay. I move adjournment.
All right, do you have a seconder?
Nick.
Next seconds, all in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
All opposed, please say nay.
Oh.
All right, you're done, carried unanimously, and thank you everybody for